So before I get into this, we were just talking about this, and I think it'd be fitting for you to explain. So you kind of specialize in like informational entities and pataphysics. What is pataphysics? I get confused about this like all the time.
Okay, so there's what pataphysics is called in the real world and the origins of the sort of term, and then there's the way it's used in the SCP Wiki, which is very different. So the idea is in the real world, a bunch of philosophers were sitting around and they were like, okay, so we have the physical world and we apply science to that using physics, and then we have the world of ideas and philosophy and things, and we that's all like metaphysical. And it's like, well, what if there was even a layer above that, right? What if there was a layer above just like how ideas form naturally? And they called it pataphysics, and they kind of treated it as a joke, and they put like an apostrophe at the front of it because the idea was like, because it's something that's beyond physics, like it's also beyond pronunciation. But it's like all the details around how it was created are wacky and aren't specified, and you can go look it up on Wikipedia and it will hurt your head more than what I'm saying right now. But the way it's used there doesn't really matter so much. The way it's used over here in SCP Wiki land is it's the idea that the characters in the SCP Wiki universe know and understand to some extent that their universe is at least partially fictional, and the science of how they try and understand how that works is called pataphysics. And it kind of makes sense because the idea is like, if you've got something that's beyond metaphysics, beyond like just how ideas form, what are the ideas that make ideas form? You could interpret it as like somebody writing a story, an author writing those ideas into existence. And then B, you could interpret it as like, oh, well, the reasons we have all of these like philosophical, metaphysical ideas are because of like archetypes and stories and things that are in the collective consciousness. And so because of those sort of aspects of this weird jokey thing that happened over here, that became the name for the study of metafiction within the Foundation universe.
Cool. I thought that was really a fun fact. Especially because I've definitely seen, I get confused about it all the time. And I think partially also is because there are a lot of people who think they have an idea of what pataphysics is, but they get confused with the real world definition compared to the SCP definition of it. Well, I guess like loose definition. But so I thought this is interesting. From what I've seen on your author page, you're a very new author, right? Like you've only written in the 5,000 series. How'd you get into the SCP universe as a whole?
Yeah, so it was a result of the start of the quarantine. So we all locked in March 13th, and we were like, all right, in and out, 2 weeks, this will be great. And it was not 2 weeks. I was very into Factorio at the time. Factorio is a very cool building and logistics video game that I play quite a bit. I had gotten it for Christmas, and so I had been playing it for a few months, and I continued to play it for a couple months, and that's when I started to get into like Discord communities for that sort of thing. And so I was on Discord more, and then I sort of started to get bored of it around, I'm going to say April or May, and around early May, I was getting into reading SCP again. Now, obviously, I knew what it was because everybody has seen the, Markiplier thumbnails and whatever. Everybody knows in some nebulous way that SCP exists and may or may not be about a funny peanut statue. It's not about a funny peanut statue. But I don't need to tell your listeners that. Anyway, the point is I was getting into reading it, and then I discovered some of the ones that are more like meta and wall breaking. I think the one that I particularly have in mind is 5045. You Get Used to It by Pasarasta 1, also known as Rat King, and Henzoid, if I'm remembering correctly. But anyway, that's a really good SCP that you should check out. Rat King does some really fantastic art, and he's a very good friend of mine. I read that and it clicked, and it occurred to me like, oh, like, yes, this is an interconnected universe and there's all of this lore and crosslinks and I love all of it and that's very cool. But also, like, there are real people like sitting at home writing this stuff, and I could potentially be one of those people, which kind of blew my mind a little bit.
Yeah.
And so then I went and found SCP Declassified. I found the Discord server. I tried to become a member of the site, and that's where I fell into the laps of some very capable authors who told me that I had no idea what I was doing, and I need to spend a lot of time practicing and observing before I could write something that wouldn't get immediately deleted from the site. So yeah, and the rest is history, I suppose.